Perfect. Wim, Micha, thanks for supporting the group all the way from Belgium. For the new people to the group, so Sam, Matt and I work for IO. We're a tech recruitment company based out of Tampa. We've got offices in the UK and Europe for anyone that's tuned in further afield. If you're looking for anything in the cloud space, whether it be Azure, obviously more likely if you're in this meetup, or anything else, just get in touch with us. We've got some great roles at the moment in development, QA, DevOps, and potentially some information security stuff. So reach out to us. We'll help where we can. But yeah, we're on a bit of a time constraint today, so hand it over to Wim and Micha, and yeah, any questions, just whack them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end.
Okay. Thank you for the nice intro, Elliot. And so hello, everyone, and welcome to our session titled Azure Bastion. One does not simply walk into my VNet. Before we start, we first want to thank the organizers and everyone involved for setting up this meetup and for allowing us to deliver a session. And of course, also a big thank you to the sponsor, IO Associates. We think with the title and the picture, the topic will be rather clear, and we hope that at the end of the session, everyone starts using the Azure Bastion service. So on the agenda today, the first thing we're talking about, first of all, we will look at common VM administrative access methods, the different ways, the good ones, the bad ones, on how you can connect to your EAS VMs before Bastion then. This one is also followed by a demo. Then we will talk about what Azure Bastion is and dig a little deeper in how to use it and to deploy it. And followed by two truly focused Bastion demos. And after the last demo, we will look at the future roadmap. And at the end of the session, we will also go through the key takeaways to really focus on the things we think you should really remember when using Azure Bastion. And completely at the end, just like Elliot already said, I think we probably will still have some time for a Q&A where we'd love to answer any of your questions. So, okay, let me first shortly introduce myself for the people who don't know me. My name is Wim Matthyssen. I live in Belgium, where I work as a Azure Technical Advisor. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer and an Azure MVP, and next to that, also a founding board member of MC2MC. I also have my own blog. You can reach it at https://wmatthyssen.com, where I blog a lot about my daily experience with Azure and all related Microsoft hybrid cloud services. And like you can see on the slide, like most IT professionals these days, I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out, just want to say hi or have a question around Azure Bastion, you can always reach me through my Twitter handle at Wim Matthyssen, or you can now even simply scan the QR code on the slide. And I will now let Micha introduce himself. So Micha, go ahead, I would say.
Hi all. So my name is Micha Wets. I'm an independent contractor from Belgium, my own small company. I'm a technology strategist at Aspects, which is a CSP from Belgium. Next to that, I also do some solution architecting at NXP, the semiconductor from the Netherlands. I became member of MC2MC right after the start. So Wim was one of the board members. I was glad to be able to join MC2MC. I became Microsoft MVP the end of 2018, just before my birthday, which was awesome, of course. And I got the reward for working on Windows Virtual Desktop. So I focus mainly on Windows Virtual Desktop deployments from Windows Virtual Desktop, but also the services around WVD. So Azure services, migration from on-prem to Azure, hybrid or full cloud, things like that. Just as Wim, you can see my Twitter handle, my LinkedIn, awesome QR code, and also my blog, which I try to keep up, but it's hard to do all sessions and things like that. But enough for the intro, let's dive into Azure Bastion.
So let us first take a look at the common VM administrative access methods. So like probably most of you know, the easiest way, but the least secure one to connect to an Azure VM is by using its PIP, its public IP address. In this way, you can connect to the VM through RDP or SSH, depending if the VM is Windows or a Linux VM. And if a network security group or NSG, like we say, is associated to that specific VM subnet where the VM runs, or even maybe on the NIC itself, that's something you also see from time to time. You simply need to allow TCP port 3389 or TCP port 22 to get it working. This kind of way of connecting to your Azure IaaS VMs is good for studying purpose, let us say, or when you need to do a quick test in your dev test subscription. But you should never, mark our words, at the moment my words, use it in a production environment to connect to any of your business critical or other production VMs. Because by using this way to connect to your VMs, one or both of the management ports will be widely opened on the internet. And in this way, your VM can be easily attacked and breached, like you can see on the slide by orcs, for example, but in real life by hackers or whoever people who want to get access to your VMs. Another way to connect to your IaaS VMs is by placing them behind an Azure external load balancer. Instead of the VM, the load balancer then uses the public IP address, and you can connect to it through RDP once again, or through SSH, once again also over the public internet, just like you would do with a single VM in the previous slide, which had an associated PIP. The external load balancer then will redirect the connection to the VM behind it. I think Micha and myself already saw this method being used sometimes by customers, maybe once or twice, so it's not that familiar. But in our opinion, it's kind of security through obscurity, like I say, because one or both management ports will still be opened on the internet. Only now there is an external load balancer in front, and again, not a really good method and secure method to connect to your IaaS VMs, and this in any production or pre-prod environment. And why? You should know in both ways you can't really prevent any breaches, and this because attackers mostly target VMs with open management ports on internet-facing VMs. As an example, in case of such a brute force attack, for example, an attacker can easily compromise a VM, and by this establishing a foothold into your environment from where they can do whatever they want to do, steal your data. Maybe if that specific VM is a EAS web server, they can maybe install some crypto mining malware and use it for a cryptocurrency mining. So not really good ways to connect to your VMs. If you opened one of those management ports, if it's RDP or SSH, and you open the associated NSG on your subnet level, for example, you will see that the name field, which the rule name is preceded by a hazard triangle with an exclamation mark telling you that there's security risk by opening these ports to the internet. And also, if you open Azure Security Center, for people who are familiar with it, under the recommendations, it's another place these days because they changed it. You will see a security recommendation saying that those management ports should be closed on those specific virtual machines. And mostly as a quick fix, Azure Security Center, for example, will recommend to enable JIT for those VMs, but more on later on JIT. So the question we as Azure admins need to ask ourselves is, in which way can we securely connect to our Azure VMs? Well, first of all, probably familiar to most people, by use of a site-to-site VPN or an ExpressRoute. In this way, you can connect from your on-premises network to the private IP address of the VM. Next to those two, you can also use a point-to-site VPN. With a point-to-site VPN, you can set up a secure connection to a VNet or different VNets if they're peered, for example. and this from your own computer or from, let us say, a secure workstation, for example. With a point-to-site VPN, these days you can use certificate-based authentication or even radius, but you can also use the OpenVPN protocol and Azure AD authentication. So in this way, you don't need to work with a certificate anymore. Next to those, another resource Micha and myself see being still used a lot in a lot of customer environments is a jump box or a jump post or jump server, like some people like to name it. A jump box is a server in a network, and in this case, of course, in Azure. And this jump box is used to access the other VMs in a separated security zone or in one of the spoke VNets if you're working in the hub spoke model, probably familiar to most people. You can see it as a control entry point into your Azure environment, mostly set up in a separated VNet or subnet, like a management VNet or a management subnet. And it will improve your overall security and reduce the attack surface of your EAS VMs. You can see it like you kind of jump from that VM to your other VMs and from there then manage them. To allow access from the internet, this VM also uses a PIP, and most of the time it's deployed as a very small Linux VM. And in this way, you kind of tunnel your RDP connection through an SSH connection. And instead of a Linux VM, I think we even saw it, some customer using an RDS gateway as a small VM, and by this tunneling the RDP protocol through SSL. So I think you can see a jump box is a good alternative to create a secure connection. But once again, like you can see on the bottom of the slide, it's yet another resource for you to keep updated and backed up, and one that you need to troubleshoot whenever it fails. And if you want to perceive, for example, high availability, you should have at least 2 jump boxes deployed. So in the case that one of them is down, you still have a second one you can use to connect and use to manage your spoke VMs. Because that jump box is also connected with the PIP, a way to protect that jump box is by using, and the way to securely connect to your EAS VM is with the use of just-in-time VM access or JIT. JIT, for people who don't know it, enables you to lock down your VMs at the network level by blocking inbound traffic to the specific management ports like RDP or SSH. And in the meantime, it will limit the amount of time that those management ports are open whenever a request is opened. And this for a maximum of, I think it's now around 24 hours. In this way, it kind of enables you to control the access and reduce the attack surface to your EAS VMs. JIT is available when you use Azure Defender on tier in Azure Security Center. Just keep in mind that it only supports Azure Resource Manager VMs. So if you're still running ISM Classic VMs, I hope nobody's doing that in these production environments, you can't use JIT. How does JIT work? Well, first of all, like I already said, a user needs to request access to a VM, and then Security Center in the back checks if that user has role-based access permissions for that VM. And if so, the request is approved. And then Security Center automatically configures the NSG to allow inbound traffic to the requested ports. And this also for the requested amount of time. When that time window is passed, Security Center automatically restores the NSG back to its previous state, by which the NSG will no longer allow any inbound traffic on the requested ports. And a nice feature when you use JIT is that all those requests, so a user makes a request, can be reviewed in the activity log. So you can really see who's asking access, when, how long he has that access, and so on. So yeah, it's a good way to follow up who asked it and when he asked it. But let me demo some things to make it all but clear. So let me first open my Azure portal. I hope this will work. It's showing now, Micha, I think, instead of my slides. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I have some VMs running in my environment. You can see I have my demo VM. Let us assume that this is my jump host because I have a public IP address attached to it. It's a Windows VM, so I can try to connect to it. We do this through the portal now for the moment. It's better to show it. You always see whenever you're at your Windows, you can click on the connect. You can click on the RDP button because the Windows VM. You can see at the top, there is a bar showing this VM as just-in-time access policy. So yeah, I'm the owner of the environment. So I'm a person who has role-based access control to access that VM. So the first thing I need to do is request access. You can see there's something started in the back. So I'm requested access. My access is now approved. So in the back, as a security center now enables the NSG, so I can access it through port 3389. And now I can download the RDP file. I can open that specific file. Let me see where it is. It's over here. So now it should be showing. I can now simply click on connect. It's again on my other screen, I think. I just can type in my password, my super secret one. I hope I don't make a typo. I just click on OK. And just like you used to, you can just access the VM or the P is opening. And you can see I have access to that specific VM. Let me make this a little bit bigger. You can see I'm accessing it through its public IP address. And yeah, I don't make it. And I can do whatever I want in that specific VM just with the use of JIT. In the back, if you now go to Security Center, you just open it. It's taking its time today. You go to Azure Defender. You scroll down completely to the bottom. And over here, you see a button. Just click on it. It's saying the just-in-time one. And you can see that I requested access. There are two requests for the moment for that specific VM. On port 3389, you can see my email address at the same time. So I can now do whatever I want, and you can follow it up from over here. You can also open the activity log. If you, for example, go into the properties, yeah, no, that's not the thing I need. The properties of VM. Let me click on the edit one. So if you want to edit the request, for example, the time range is now 3 hours. If you want to make it an hour, you can edit everything you want, and yeah, you also can enable extra ports for it. So I think that's it for the first demo. So I think, Micha, you can go ahead with the first part of Azure Bastion.
Yes, let me share my screen. Okay. Should be able to see my screen right now. Let's move this away. Okay. So let's see what is Azure Bastion exactly, what it does, what it helps us with, and what Microsoft thinks that it is. This is the quote or the name that the solution description that Microsoft gives us. So Azure Bastion is a PaaS service inside your virtual network. But let's dive into this. What is Azure Bastion? Azure Bastion is a PaaS service, so a platform as a service, Jumpbox as a service, which will be provisioned inside your virtual network. So you need your virtual network set up, you need your virtual machines, and you can provision Azure Bastion, which we will show in the next demo as well. But it is a PaaS service, so you don't need to do any maintenance on top of it. It gives you secure RDP or SSH connectivity directly inside your Azure portal. So you need to sign into the Azure portal using HTTPS, so it's SSL encrypted. You can specify permissions, and you can use the Azure Portal to connect to your virtual machine. Instead of, like Wim showed, connecting using RDP, you will use the Azure Portal to connect to your virtual machine. Big advantage is, again, no public IP address. So you don't need to assign public IP addresses to your virtual machines. Only a public IP address is used by Azure Bastion itself. This will reduce your costs a little bit because each public IP you will pay for it. So a little bit, but it reduces your cost. So it's always a big advantage. Also, you don't need to install anything on your virtual machines, not on Windows, not on Linux. So it's completely agentless for your environment. You just install your virtual machine and it's Azure Bastion is able to connect to your virtual machines. If we look at the internal part of Azure Bastion, it's a virtual machine scale set. So Azure and Microsoft deploys a VM scale set for you. It's being displayed as a Bastion service, but in the backend, it's a virtual machine scale set. The reason is quite simple. This is for scaling purposes. So the more sessions that are being directed to the Bastion service, the more VMs that will be deployed or will be starting up for you. But then again, it's a PaaS service, so you don't need to worry about that any time or any place. Also, an additional service or advantage is the big protection against port scanning. I think you all know if you open up a virtual machine with 3389 or 22, and you would check your firewall logs, you would directly see port scanning happening. If it remains open, you will even see login attempts to the mostly known users like root, like administrator, like admin, things like that. So it's always a security. It also gives you protection for zero-day exploits, because if there is a new exploit found in Windows, which barely happens, you have the protection because it's not your virtual machine that is connected to the internet, it's the Bastion service. Also for malware targeting, it's definitely a great protection for you. How does it work? To show you a diagram of a typical installation, you have your virtual network, you have your virtual machines inside a virtual machine subnet. And what we do is we ask Microsoft for a Azure Bastion service. You have to provision a subnet before that, but Wim will dive into that as well. And the Bastion service will be deployed inside that subnet. So it is injected inside your virtual network. It gets a public IP, and only the SSL port 443 needs to be exposed to the internet. So you can have your network security group or your Azure firewall in front of it, or any other firewall that you want to deploy yourself, can be placed in front of it, and only port 443 needs to be exposed to the internet. After that, inside your own VNet with your subnets, with your own virtual machines inside that subnet, only the by default RDP and SSH ports need to be opened, so 3389 and 22. And your virtual machines, as indicated over here, only need a private IP. So no public IP is required, just the private IP, which will be used by the Azure Bastion service. So no public IPs, just a simple network interface, private IP inside your VNet, inside that subnet, and that's it. NSG configured to allow the RDP and SSH protocols, and you're good to go. A couple of months ago, there was a major disadvantage for Azure Bastion. If you wanted to use Azure Bastion, you would need to deploy your Bastion service inside each VNet. So if you would have the typical hub spoke model, where you have one hub and all those spokes containing all your virtual machines, and you have VNet peering between them, you would need to deploy a Bastion service inside each of your virtual networks. So there you still have the protection, but it would become quite expensive to run. Luckily, Microsoft listened to the user voice, and at this moment in public preview, the VNet peering is supported for Azure Bastion. So you can deploy Azure Bastion inside your hub or inside your gateway subnet, gateway spoke, but still use that one to connect to all your virtual machines. So you only need to deploy it once. Use cases. If you have an environment and you want to protect it, of course, and you don't have VPN or ExpressRoute available, so no site-to-site, no point-to-site is available, then you can use Azure Bastion because it enhances your virtual machines, the protection from your virtual machines. Also, if a jump box does not meet the requirements, a lot of Azure environments do have a policy, an Azure policy deployed, which does not allow 2389 to be publicly available. Then Azure Bastion, again, is a solution. Sometimes even a jump box can be more expensive, depending on the amount of people that need to connect to it, of course. If you have a hard requirement for HTTPS, so everything needs to be HTTPS before it can enter your environment, then Azure Bastion service is also the solution. Also, if you have the requirement to remove any management from your jump box or your entry point to the virtual machines, then it needs to be PaaS. Then Azure Bastion is also the solution, because only as gateways or a jump box, those need to be updated, those need to be deployed, maintained, things like that. So it's not a good thing for management. Also, if you need to have a solution that can be easily deployed and easily be removed, Azure Bastion is also a service that can be deployed when needed and can be removed again. So also a solution for that. And again, like Wim already demoed, it's also compatible with JIT. So if you want to be able to assign temporary access to a virtual machine on top of all those other requirements, you can still combine it with JIT. So you don't need any additional service like VPN, also no access to other resources, just give the user permissions to the Bastion service and assign JIT to it, and you have a top-notch protection. Like all things in Azure, in the Azure world, there is a price attached to it. Wim did the lookup for the US prices. Normally we do it in West Europe prices. Now Wim added the US prices as well. So if you deploy Azure Bastion and it remains in one zone, then the 1 month's price will be $139. So this is if you have the Bastion service running 24/7. There's also the costs for traffic. So the first 5 gigabytes per month are for free. And then you have the tiers that run up to 500 terabytes, which is quite a lot. But then you have those tier prices. So good thing to know that Azure Bastion service is a service that can be quickly deployed and quickly be removed again, so you can reduce your costs there as well. Also important to keep in mind, there are zones which Microsoft uses. So zone 1 is typical West Europe, US regions, France, Canada, those regions. Zone 2 are the Australian East, Japan regions, East Asia regions, things like that. So those are zone 2, and those have different zones in the Azure Bastion pricing. Enough talking, let's dive into a demo. What I have over here, so I created a resource group with a VNet, 2 virtual machines. No, I don't want to see those. Okay, so 2 virtual machines. One is a Linux virtual machine and one is a Windows virtual machine. And as you can see over here, they have no public IP addresses. No public IP addresses attached to those virtual machines. So in this case, like Wim already showed, if we would go to the overview and we go to connect RDP, then we don't get the public IP address, we only get the private IP address because there is no public IP address available. And if we would want to connect to this virtual machine using this private IP address, we would need a site-to-site or a point-to-site connection. We don't have that. It's a minimal environment, VNet virtual machines, that's it. So what I did already is deploy my Bastion service. The Bastion service deployed inside the VNet. And as you can see, it's inside my VNet in the Azure Bastion subnet. It has a public IP address, and only this service, as you can see over here, has the public IP address assigned. If we want to connect to our virtual machines, we can quickly go. Can I remove this somewhere? Okay. No.
No, it's still there.
Okay, it's gone. So what I will do is connect to my Windows virtual machine. I will say connect, but instead of connect using the RDP, I'm going to select Bastion. So you get to this one, use Bastion, which is down below here. And then we can simply type in my username that I want to use to connect to my environment. It has the option open in new window. So I hit on connect. We get a pop-up. And inside my browser, I connect to my virtual machine. So it's using the HTML5 web client in the backend, and I'm just simply connected to my virtual machine. And I can do all management that I want, just like an RDP connection that I would do like Wim demoed in the previous demo. It's nothing special about it. You can simply download any file, visit any website. I pre-prepped the Tampa Bay website here for the meetup, so it's a really full session. I can do anything I want on this virtual machine. This is for a Windows virtual machine. The same for my Linux virtual machine. Again, you can go to the overview, hit on Bastion connection, use Bastion, and type in username and password, or if you want to use SSH, you can also use SSH. I did it the lazy way and I went for the password solution.
Like a true Linux admin.
Yes. We are Azure consultants and we are not Linux consultants.
That's true.
And as the same way as we had in the Windows environment, we are connected to the Linux environment. As Wim said, we are real Linux administrators. So the Linux commands that we know are very limited. There's always an awesome demo that we use, which is the parrot.live. So if you curl parrot.live, then you get this awesome thing, which is dancing parrot. But just to show you, you can do anything on your virtual machine, on your Linux virtual machine, because it's just an SSH connection to your environment. Wim will also show you the management. I will not do the management, Wim. I will leave it up to you.
It's fine with me. Yeah, sure. Good
Okay.
for me.
Then he will show you also how you can manage those sessions. But this was the demo, how you can use Azure Bastion, how you can quickly connect to your environments. Back to you, Wim.
Yeah. Let me share my screen again. Yes. Your screen should be gone and mine should be showing now.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let me quickly select the right slides. Okay. So here we go again. So after the second demo, thanks again, Micha. Let us, and I always love that parrot. Let us now take a deeper look on how you can deploy Azure Bastion. It's best that before you start with your deployment, that you check if the Azure Bastion service is available in your region. In the Europe and the US regions, there shouldn't be any problem. I think currently Bastion is available in 41 regions, but there are still some regions in the world where the service isn't available. And after that, in the case, if you have a specific governance strategy in place, or you have a Azure governance plan you need to follow, you should follow it, especially for the naming of the Bastion host and for the use of the necessary resource tags. For people who don't know it, with resource tags, you can add extra metadata to any Azure resource. A tag itself always, and tag itself always exists of a name and a value. And a good tag to use in combination with Azure Bastion is, for example, one that describes the VNet. So previously you had to deploy a Bastion host in every VNet where you wanted to use the VMs. With the Pure, it's not the case anymore. So mostly it will be the hub VNet. But if you still want to deploy it in more, a good tag to use is the one that specifies the VNet. Before you start deploying a Bastion host, you can already create the specific subnet in your VNet. The subnet always has to have the name Azure Bastion subnet, like you could show in the demo of Micha, and should at least be /27 or larger. You should also check if the necessary address space is available in your VNet, because the thing we see a lot is that the complete address space is already in use by other subnets. And then you can't deploy the Bastion host before saving the VNet address space. But mostly in most production environments, that's not quite easy to do. If you already protect the subnet with NSG, you should also see that all the necessary inbound and outbound rules are in place to allow necessary access on the needed ports. Otherwise, your deployment will fail. It will definitely fail and it will not go on. You should also keep in mind for people who are already using Azure Firewall or any other network virtual appliance that you shouldn't associate the Azure Bastion subnet in your route table. Otherwise, you will end up with blocking the traffic required for Azure Bastion to work. The Bastion host itself requires a static public IP. If you also create this one in advance through scripting or through infrastructure as code, whatever you use, you should use a standard public IP SKU. And then you simply can go ahead with deploying Azure Bastion. You can do it through the Azure Portal. You can do it through Azure PowerShell, CLI, or use a norm template. If you use Terraform, you can use that one. Whatever the thing you're most familiar with, you can start deploying. So like I already said on the previous slide, you can harden the subnet used by the Azure Bastion host. You can do this with NSGs, and this to only allow the necessary inbound and outbound traffic. So for example, on the Azure Bastion subnet, you should allow TCP traffic on ports 443, for the service stack internet, also allow TCP traffic on ports 443 and 4443. And this for the service stack gateway manager. And this will allow all management traffic to reach to a specific point. And if you're using, for example, Azure Load Balancers, for the health probes, you also enable port 443 for the Azure Load Balancer service stack. And this will allow, the health probes will allow the Azure Load Balancers to detect connectivity. And if something is wrong, you will see it. After those, you can deny any other traffic with a priority rule, for example, for 900. And then, now I'm back. So, excuse me. As the outbound rules on the same Azure Bastion subnet, you should allow TCP traffic, of course, for 3389 or 22, depending if you're using RDP or SSH. If you're using both, you should allow both. And you can do it with the service stack virtual network. And this simply to allow the management of your VMs in the different subnets. Next to that, you should also allow traffic on port 443, and this for the service stack Azure Cloud. The Azure Cloud tag holds all Azure Data Center public IPs, which among other things are required by the Azure Bastion host to connect to various public endpoints within Azure. And finally, on all your VM subnets, you should allow inbound traffic on port 3389 and 22, and that you can do for specifically for the Azure Bastion subnet IP range. So when you try to add an NSG to the Azure Bastion subnet, if there was not one in place in advance, or you just want to change it, you probably will receive an error if not all the required inbound and outbound rules are in place. So if you're missing one of the above, you will not be able to associate the NSG, and also when you try to change it, it will not work. So just keep in mind that if not all required rules are there, the delete or change will fail. So look out for that one. As an Azure admin, like Micha already said, from time to time, you also need to be able to troubleshoot your Azure services. And just like most other services, you can also use log diagnostics for Azure Bastion. So for example, when a user connects to workloads using Azure Bastion, it will log the diagnostics of the remote sessions. And then you can use those diagnostics to view which users connected to which workloads, at what time, from where, and other such relevant logging information. In order to use a diagnostic, you just need to enable diagnostic logs on Azure Bastion, but I will show you in the next demo. Micha already said you can combine Azure Bastion with JIT access, but the strange thing is, even now, you still need to request access first on the RDP tab, like I showed in my demo. You need to open RDP, you need to request access, and then you can go to the Bastion tab, and from there log on through your VM through the portal. I hope in some time Microsoft will add that specific button integrated under the Azure Bastion blade. But yeah, now if you want to use it in that way, you should do it like that. In order to access a virtual machine with Bastion, you should be aware that at least the following roles are required if you're using RBAC, but probably most people do. First of all, the reader role on the virtual machine, and also the reader role on the NIC with the private IP of the VM. And last but not least, you should also have the reader role on the Azure Bastion resource itself, otherwise it will not work. Just like Micha said, you can connect to your Azure IaaS VMs who's running Windows or Linux, but you can also connect to all your VMs in a VM scale set, and even to Dev Test Lab VMs. There's some specific procedure you need to follow before you can get that working, but it's well explained on the Microsoft docs. So if you're using Dev Test Labs and you want to use Azure Bastion, look it up on the Microsoft docs, and you can follow it from there. for the moment, you can have around, I think, 25 concurrent RDP connections and around 50, if I'm correct, SSH connections. But it really depends, who's already connected. Are there already some ongoing RDP connections or ongoing SSH sessions? But yeah, it would be strange if 50 people at the same time are connecting to a Linux VM, I think, or to more Linux VMs. That would say you have a lot of people working in Azure, but mostly that wouldn't be the case. What can you do in a remote session? Yeah, until now, well, for the moment, you can only copy and paste of text you support. So if you're working on your desktop, you can copy and paste from there and then use it in your VM, for example. You can expand your tab view to the full screen view, but the thing still missing, there is no file transfer support. So maybe you have a document, an executable or whatever located on a folder on your desktop or in your Windows Explorer. You want to copy it inside the RDP connection, just like you can mostly do in RDP connections. It will not work in with the Azure Bastion service. So hopefully in the future, Microsoft will fix this also, because yeah, it can be a well handy feature, I think. So let me quickly demo some things. So I think my Azure Portal is showing again. So you can see I go to my Bastion chat from the sidebar. You can see that I already have a specific Bastion host running. You can see it's running in my hub network. So if you open that one, just like Micha said, Micha had a Windows VM opened and a Linux VM. If you're the Azure Bastion admin and you need to manage those sessions, you can just click on their sessions. I have now no sessions opened, but if you have open sessions, they will show up over here. And as the admin, you can even drop those sessions from this specific blade. If you want to enable the diagnostic settings, just go under monitor, opening diagnostic settings, and you can see, wait, I will show it over here. I will edit my settings. I've enabled the Bastion audit logs, and they were written, will be written to my log analytics workspace at that specific location. If you don't have a log analytics workspace, you can even use a storage account, or if you want to stream it, you can even use an event hub. It's whatever way you want to use it, you can do it. You simply configure it. You can also do it through infrastructure as code, or you can just enable it from over here, and that's it. But if, let us say, you want to create a new Bastion host, this one is not here, you're not seeing that one. You can simply, if you want to do it through the portal, by clicking on the add, it will open. I have my specific subscription. Let me select the specific resource group. Let us say my production Bastion. I already had that resource group in place. You give it a name. Bastion demo, for example. You choose your location. For me, it's West Europe. So let me quickly look that one up. You select a specific virtual network. It's my production network because I already have one running in my hub network. I also created the Azure Bastion subnetting advanced in that specific network. I can select it. It can create its own new public IP that it needs to use, or you can use an existing one. Doesn't matter. It's a static. You can add some tags if you want. Let us say environment and demo, just to show you. Then you can click further. Validation passed. You can click on create, and I think it takes around 5 minutes, and deployment is in progress. And after 5 minutes, you can start using the Azure Bastion host. So it's quite easy to set it up. I mostly do it through Azure PowerShell. So I open my Cloud Shell, I run it. And the trick is I delete it after I've done it with my work. So the pricing will not go up. It's not running for a complete month. So the trick is to build it up with a good code, just run the script. It's there within 2 to 5 minutes. Do your thing on your VMs, and you can even drop it again. But we didn't say that one because Microsoft still needs to make some money, but that's the way you can use it. But yeah, at the end of, if you're still using jump host, if you just need to pay around $138, it was, I think, it's not that quite of money if you're running hundreds of VMs. So that will probably not make your Azure bill go up quite high. So yeah, but yeah, there are different ways to use it. Let me show the slides again. So Micha, maybe you want to tell this one?
Yes. So the roadmap, Microsoft will also continue to work on Azure Bastion service next to the VNet peering support that is now enabled. These are a few that are enabled right now. Some highlights perhaps is the full session recording, which will be an awesome thing as well, because then you can record a specific RDP session as well. But also the private IP for Azure Bastion. Right now you have the public IP. With the private IP support, you could even protect your Azure Bastion host itself. And then you will add the access through an ExpressRoute or a site-to-site, point-to-site before you can even access your Bastion service. So it is an additional layer of security that will be added. Also the PIM integration and the SSO using MFA, those are all future roadmap items. And of course, yeah, the feedback page that will be added, yeah.
And it's still there, I think,
yeah,
because for some user voice, for some services, the user voices are gone, but the one for Azure Bastion is still there. So if you have an idea or you want something to add or just upvote one of those things, you should visit that page and click around, I would say.
Yeah.
So before closing off, we just want to give you some key takeaways. 5 things we think you should really remember about our session of today, and you should really think about when you start using Azure Bastion. So first of all, Azure Bastion is a PaaS service that you provision inside any virtual network and which gives you a secure and seamless RDP SSH connectivity to your EAS VMs, and this directly from inside the Azure Portal over SSL. When you use Azure Bastion, there is no need to use a PIP for connecting to your VMs. So that's quite an important one. With a new preview, you only need one Bastion host to manage your hub-spoke VMs. Mostly place your Bastion host in the Azure Bastion subnet inside the hub network. And you can connect from there through VNet peering to all your other spokes and the VMs running in them. And of course, you can harden your deployment with just allowing the necessary inbound and outbound rules by adjusting the NSG connected to the Azure Bastion subnet, or you can even use a JIT in combination with Azure Bastion. And last but not least, but I think that counts for everything you start running in Azure, keep an eye on your cloud spend, because if you still need to deploy some Azure Bastion hosts in some kind of way, whatever, if you have more environments, more Azure environments, this can be expensive. And with that, we also listed some references. So if you want to get started with Azure Bastion after our session, you can look at all of those. I also have a script link, I think. I will place it on my GitHub page, and I will link it on my blog, which allows you to set up an Azure Bastion host through Azure PowerShell with all needed resources at once. So you can just run that one. And I think with that, we want to thank you for your attention, and we really hope you learned something interesting today, and that you all start using Azure Bastion. So thank you for your attention from myself and Micha.
Thanks, guys. That was really good.
Any questions? If not, everybody is already off with lunchtime, because
I think that's the problem. You guys, a lot of people.
I think we're right on the minute. I think.
They've got to go to their roundups and stand-ups and stuff. So you can't blame them. But that's why we record all these things. So I'm sure if you've got like handles, Twitter handles and stuff like that, if you can share them afterwards, that'd be brilliant. And then they can reach
they're on the slide. So if they want to reach out, ask a question around Azure Bastion, just go ahead. We're happy to answer them all.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's really great. Have you got? Can you share the deck with us so we can pass that on?
I will send it. We'll send it to Elliot through LinkedIn. I think. I will do it later on today. Well, this evening at our site.
Yeah, your time. Guys, thank you so much. Is there any questions? Just whilst they're here, you may as well use them.
I see some things in the chat, but maybe it's just people saying some things. Yeah.
I think Barrett said
there were no specific questions.
Yeah, someone said thanks for including the NSG info. It's really exactly like the one it's shown on the slide, because on the docs it's not completely correct for people, but yeah, I will try to drop them also in my script, and then you just need to run that script from wherever, Windows Terminal or Cloud Shell, or from your Azure DevOps pipeline, whatever you use, and then it's all in place at once. But it needs to be exactly those in and outbound rules, otherwise it will not work. Or you just don't connect an NSG to that specific socket. That's another thing. But that's less secure, of course.
So I wanted to ask, like, how would you compare this to like Amazon's systems manager? Like, it seems the systems manager has an agent-based system where you have to install the agent on each system, whereas this is more like
agentless, completely agentless. You just need to deploy it. Just in the back, it's a jump host, but it's completely managed by Microsoft. So you don't need to manage the VM. You don't need to deploy it. You don't need to protect it for zero-day exploits or whatever. It's a different way to do it. I'm not an AWS guy, so I really, maybe Micha uses it in that way also.
No. Full Azure.
But this thing is really agentless, so you really don't need to install anything on the VMs itself. But the nice trick would be if it could be working if you're using a Windows 10 device, and you can use the integrated RDP client and connect from there through your Azure Bastion host without opening a web browser, for example. That should also be a nice addition, I think. I hope this kind of answers your question.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just trying to get a feel for how it actually works.
Yep.
It's more, you can compare it to the HTML5 web client, which you can install on RDS, or the one you can use in WVD. It's kind of the same. So in the Bastion service, you have the HTML5 engine, which they run on the VM scale set, and you use that one inside your portal to connect to your virtual machine.
That makes sense. Do you know if there's a way to do like port forwarding? Like if I had like a SQL server running in a private subnet, would I be able to do like a port forward over to that?
It's not a peered subnet. It's not peered to any other VNets in your environment. It's completely separated from all those.
No, I mean, it could be, obviously you could have the
through VNet peering it works, because in most environments I work in, customer environments, it's just VNet peering and then it works. I myself never tried it. It's possible through port forwarding, but I can try it out if you want.
Yeah, that would
it's a nice one. Yeah, it's without a VNet peering if you want to do it. Yeah, in the more But the thing is, it already doesn't work with Azure Firewall, because you can't integrate it in any of your setups over there. So I'm not sure if it's going to work with port forwarding. It could, but it's not directly a use case I came in touch with. But it's a good question, to be honest. Yeah, really good question. But didn't try that out yet, so.
Cool, thanks for the answer.
If anyone else has anything, please, follow up. If not, I'll let these guys one have dinner and one
go to dinner.
One get back to their day.
And all the other people back to work probably.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, precisely. You're allowed to do your work now. thank you for turning up. It was a really good turnout at the start, and I've got this recording. I'll share it all. The handles are there. I'm sure the guys are nice enough to answer any questions that any follow-ups have.
And I will share the deck with Elliot, and then
That'd be
you
brilliant.
guys can
Thank you.
share it also through the audience. So
that's awesome. Thank you. Well, look,
thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That was amazing. Cheers.
Thanks for seeing you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Take care, guys. Have a good day.
Bye bye.